Hello everyone, my name is Kyle Payne and thank you so much for joining me on today's live webinar presentation on how to take your franchise to the next level. And I will be your host for today's presentation, as well as one of three speakers. And along with myself, I also have Emmanuel Hardy from Devoted Business Solutions and Jody Milbrat from Employer Solutions Group joining me to share on their area of expertise working with franchise business owners to help you grow your business and take it again to that next level. Now we got a pretty full house already, so I'm going to go ahead and just get started with what we have on our agenda for today, starting with the right mindset and why the right mindset is so critical. Then we're going to jump into each one of our speakers' presentations, starting with Emmanuel talking about the importance of building a strong franchise foundation, because if you don't have a strong foundation, whatever you build upon that can come crumbling down. And then I'm going to talk about the power of digital marketing, when it's done right, and how that can scale your business fast. And then we're going to wrap up with Jody talking about the importance of keeping what you build, because it doesn't matter if you build something magnificent if you don't end up keeping it because you didn't put the right logistical processes in place or the right compliance pieces in place to protect what you built. And then we're going to, along the way, you'll notice opportunities with offers on your screen to pop up for a free consultation with each one of the speakers. So if one of us shares something that you want to discuss further with us, please feel free to click on that offer, which is a free consultation. We're going to ask you a couple questions to help us understand how we can be of service to you, and then myself, Jody, or Emmanuel will follow up with you appropriately. So there's an opportunity to take this to the next level without any cost, obviously, with that free consultation. So with that being said, let's start with the right mindset and why this even matters in the first place. Now, the reality is we could have probably a day-long discussion of why the right mindset matters, but really I want to just succinctly say this much on this topic for today's conversation. And that is, from my experience, as well as Jody and Emmanuel and probably many other people's experiences, is that people's mindset will dictate the decisions they make. Meaning people can have the best of intentions, know that the decisions need to be made in a specific way, but if their mindset is in conflict with the decisions they're making, they won't make the right decisions for the business, which is why it's so critical to understand what mindset is the right mindset for your business. And for that purpose, I want to share with you a little something I've learned from Robert Kiyosaki reading his book, Cash Flow Quadrants, which is an incredible book. If you have not read it, I highly recommend picking it up and talking about the 4 different quadrants that come along with this concept, being the first quadrant being the mindset of an employee, second quadrant self-employed, third quadrant is a business owner, and fourth quadrant is an investor mindset. And talking about the decisions, how people go about making decisions based on the different mindset or quadrant that they find themselves in. And of course, how can you change the quadrant, the mindset that you're in, if it's not the right mindset for your business? So, for example, probably most people on this call at some point were a W-2 employee for a major corporation or some company. And so at that point, we were in the mindset of an employee, and we're in that mindset because we prioritized security, right? We prioritized the security of that paycheck that came every 2 weeks, so much so that we're willing to give up other things like control or personal freedom and possibly even financial freedom that are associated with different quadrants. And if we're in that mindset, even if we have the best of intentions, even if we know that we want to go out on our own and start our own business, the reality is that if we prioritize the security of that paycheck, when push comes to shove, as it always does, we will make the decision to keep the paycheck and sacrifice the other priorities associated with different mindsets. But it's that point, though, that we've probably all experienced, and why we've gotten into business for ourselves and why you started a franchise business in the first place, was that somewhere along the line you gave up the security of the paycheck as being your priority. And when you gave that up, most people gave it up because they realized that the corporations that they were working for were no guarantees to provide them with that security because of poor decisions they are making. And now your priority became that of control because you want to control the problems, the bad decisions, be in charge to make different decisions to be able to be financially secure. And it's at that point, once we've made the decision to change our priority to control, that we're now able to switch to a self-employed mindset where now we make different decisions. Now we make the decision to start our own business. Now we make the decision to put ourselves in a role where the decisions come to us to be made. The challenge, though, and why I imagine a lot of people are on this call right now, is that you've gotten into a franchise business and you're now realizing that having control as your priority is both a blessing and a curse. And what I mean by that is that you probably on some level experienced the value and the benefit of having all the decisions come to you, but you also seen the downside to that because anytime something goes wrong, it's up to you to apply a control mechanism to fix the problem. But the only problem with that is that every time anyone applies control to something that is outside of their control, it's inevitable at some point it's not going to go as planned. And if we prioritize control for certainty of outcome, the reality is we're going to continuously apply more control mechanisms that all have the possibility of not going as planned, creating this snowball effect to the point where you may have experienced this where you've lost all personal freedom. And it's at this point that we often decide to then shift and say something's got to give, hopefully. And we are now at a point where we can make a decision to prioritize personal freedom over control, and it's only at that point that we can shift into the mindset of a business owner and now make decisions based on a business owner's mindset, which is focusing on how I develop people, not how I control and put out fires. And it's when we shift from the left side of this quadrant to the right side of this quadrant that things really start to change and move and grow exponentially to the point where we gain enough income that we can have this money that we've generated, the surplus, working for us to the point where the money our money is making is great enough to cover all our expenses, making us financially independent. So we have personal and financial freedom at that point. Now I know most business owners, most franchise owners want to get to that right side of the hemisphere, or the quadrant. The challenge is, how do you get there? How do you change your mindset? Because until your mindset is truly changed, your decisions are not going to change. Your decisions will always, always, always follow suit of what mindset you have. Well, as you may have already picked up on, the key to changing your mindset is actually quite simple yet very difficult to do. And the key to changing your mindset, quite honestly, is to change your priority. It's not until as an employee, when we have a mindset of an employee, it's not until we changed our priority from security to control that our mindset changed and therefore our decisions changed. It's not until we finally changed our priority of control to being personal freedom that our mindset changed and therefore our decisions actually changed. Right? We get caught up in saying, I want to be a business owner. I believe that it is a priority, but when push comes to shove, when control and personal freedom come face to face together and butt heads, which decision we make is going to be based on which priority we truly have and which mindset we're in. A business owner will give up control all day long for personal freedom. A self-employed owner who owns his job or his or her job will keep control over personal freedom when push comes to shove. So really the key to changing your mindset is changing your priority. And the reason why we spend some time on this topic before we move on to the individual topics is because what we're going to share with you that could change your franchise, take you to the next level, is only relevant for people that are willing to change their priority to that of a business owner where your priority is personal freedom. because it's at this point that you will be able to make the decisions necessary in order to have the success with the solutions that we can provide to you, so you can become a business owner with more money than you know what to do with, that you can invest it into areas to create even more passive income, so you have personal and financial freedom. So with that being said, what I'd like to do now is introduce our first speaker, Emmanuel Hardy, who's going to talk about how you build that franchise foundation. And again, as we go through this presentation, I encourage you to keep in the back of your mind this concept of the right mindset and what mindset you have to have in order to enact and put in place the very things that Emmanuel, myself, and Jody are going to be talking about in the rest of this presentation. And I also encourage you to take advantage of the free consultation we're making available to you to learn more about your specific situation, to give you specific help for your current situation. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the baton to Emmanuel and let her introduce herself and give a little more background on herself, and then share with you on her topic, which is how to build a solid foundation for your franchise. Emmanuel, thank you so much for being on this call, and the floor is yours.